So there's no real way that I can be the multidimensional nerd and not do a review on Batman. So this entire short little episode here that we're going to do is on the new movie, The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson. Let's get into it. I got some interesting thoughts on this whole thing, so I hope that you guys will stick with me as we go through it. I am really happy with the first half of this film. It's a slow burn. It's a movie that's made for adults. It's dark. It's gritty. It's a very serious Batman. It's that Batman that you find before he finds hope, before he comes into his own understanding of hope after the death of his parents. There's some plot holes and things that I don't particularly like how supposedly Alfred is the one that taught him how to fight rather than the League of Shadows. That doesn't make any sense to me. But a lot of these things can be overlooked because the movie is so pretty. It is shot in the film noir style, so it's very much a detective film. And the banter between Jim Gordon and Batman and their interrelationship and stuff is really, really cool in this. You get more interaction between Gordon and Batman in this movie than you do in really any other Batman movie that I've seen. It's amazing. It's really, really good, and it's shot well. The director of photography has done amazing. Jeffrey Wright, who plays Jim Gordon in this one, is really, really cool. He plays a very dour Gordon rather than a very stern and the commanding Lieutenant Gordon, which we are typically used to seeing. So they do a lot of things different, and not all of those things are bad. However, the movie is really limited by its writing. Good writing can save bad acting. We saw this in Batman Begins, especially with Rachel Dawes' character. The acting wasn't really great, but the writing was so good from Nolan's perspective that Christian Bale was able to essentially carry the scene from an acting perspective, and then the lines that were delivered were still believable even though the acting wasn't all the way there. In this movie, however, the writing doesn't do itself any favors. The first half of the movie is wonderful. It climaxes with one of the greatest chase scenes between Batman and Penguin that I've ever seen. And then from there, the movie just really devolves. It loses sight of what it was trying to do in the first place. There are some really woke lines that are given off by Catwoman rather than building an actual relationship. Catwoman never actually does anything with a sense of virtue. And one of Batman's big principles is that he's incorruptible. He is the one thing in the city that cannot be corrupted. He has all of the money that he needs. And so all of the moving of money that happens in Gotham, it can't touch him. Also, he has this element of morality and virtue about him for this crime fighting gig that makes a difference. It's something that you don't ever see him compromise on. He's unwilling to compromise. And I know that in this movie, he's supposed to be that younger Batman where he still has a lot to learn. He's still kind of bad at being the Batman in this way, and he's trying to learn how. However, we don't get that sense of incorruptibility. The whole movie, Catwoman is trying to convince him to do things that are against his morality, and you actually see him like contemplating this and giving it a shot. And at no point does he ever turn around and try and convince her, like, you should help me out. You should do something good and virtuous and righteous. You should do something that actually helps save this city. And there are times where she does come to the rescue to save him, but it always seems out of like this really weird selfish motivation rather than being influenced by morality and Batman's really incorruptibility. This is one thing that in The Dark Knight Rises, Nolan's film, which is like the Nolan verse is really the gold standard for Batman. Any Batman fan will tell you that. With the Nolan films, you see Catwoman being very amoral for the sake of her own selfish desires, which is like, I want a clean slate. Like, I've been doing this burglaring thing. I'm good at it, but it was fun for a while and now I want out of it. That's really her big motivation. And she's trying to look out for herself. And Bruce is able to swing her back to the right side. He's like, I think there's more to you. I think there's more to you. I think that there's something else going on. And there's a ton of chemistry, in my opinion, between Christian Bale and Anne Hathaway. But I think that that's because of Anne Hathaway. With this movie, you don't get that same type of chemistry from Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz. One, because there's absolutely zero charisma written into Robert Pattinson's character. That's not a Robert Pattinson issue. That's a writing issue. They did not give this man an opportunity to show the playboy billionaire side of Batman. He is dour and he is grim. And in the world that they paint, that's okay. That's okay. At least for now, it's okay. Because in the early stages of Batman, that's very much what he is. He doesn't go out a whole lot as Bruce Wayne. He's not being the playboy billionaire. He's very much by himself, to himself, doing the Batman thing. And then there's a point where he like sort of brings in Dick Grayson in the larger Batman universe, not in this movie specifically, but in the larger Batman universe. When Dick Grayson comes into this thing and becomes the first Robin, that's the thing that really softens Batman up for the first time, that makes him stop being kind of this recluse. He brings an element of joy and hope into Batman's life in a similar way that Batman has been trying to bring into the world. And it's a necessary growth point. So there's potential for this story to grow out of that if they decide to turn it into a franchise. But and they've set it up for that, but I don't know exactly if they will. Also, the Riddler's character was amazing. He was really creepy. He was really well acted all the way up until he just randomly, and spoiler warning here. So if you don't want spoilers for the movie, and I haven't really spoiled anything up until this point for you, but at this point, if you don't want spoilers, don't listen anymore. He just gives himself up rather than being caught because Batman just straight up outsmarts him. He just gives himself up. And then you have this really weird scene at Arkham that took way too long that is between Batman and the Riddler trying to show that Batman is no different than the Riddler. It's trying to reveal to Batman that he's no different than the Riddler. And then the Riddler, his whole motivation through the entire thing is to try and expose the corruption in the city. And then that all falls apart because then he decides that he's going to be an avenger on the city in the same way that Batman was by massacring innocent people, because that makes a ton of sense. The Riddler abandons his motivations and goes full Bane on this thing, which Bane's motivations make a lot more sense. The League of Shadows wanting to do a clean slate, like that was something in the Nolan verse that was established from the very first movie with the League of Shadows and the plot with Ra's al Ghul, and then Bane decides he's going to take it a step farther and just obliterate the whole thing with a giant nuke. In this one, there's no motivation for the Riddler to attack the people of Gotham. He's supposedly trying to do everything for the people of Gotham. So realistically, what we should have had is two separate movies. You should have had Batman encountering the corruption of the world, influenced by Riddler and trying to track down Riddler, tracking him down and then failing to capture him at the end of this movie after he resolves everything with Carmine Falcone and sort of leaves a power vacuum for the Penguin. And then in the second movie, you have this dual bad guy thing with the Penguin and with the Riddler, where the Riddler's motivations change, and then he starts to target the people, potentially by the influence of the Penguin, and this is where you see the Batman actually have to outsmart the Riddler, save the people. You can still do the whole gritty detective thing. I think it all still works, but those should have been the two movies. Also, Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz. Zoe Kravitz has an opportunity, like I said before, to build a real relationship with Batman at this. The Catwoman has a great opportunity. Selena has a great opportunity to build a relationship with Bruce. And the writers passed it up for an opportunity to throw some woke propaganda, which I just think it's just a nod to the producers to make sure that the film could be made, because the vast majority of the film, outside of the fact that it just hates the character of Batman in and of itself, because the whole point of the film is to try and show that Batman was in error by being an avenger and by going through and punishing the bad guys for targeting innocents, and rather show him that he doesn't need to be a face of fear. He needs to be a face of hope and Batman coming into the light. And that's a giant misunderstanding. What should have happened is Batman should have realized that he doesn't just need to be in the darkness, he also needs to be in the light. Whenever everything sort of collapses at the end of this movie, Batman should have faded back into the shadows, and Bruce Wayne should have showed up with a brand new section of Wayne Tech or a brand new section of Wayne Enterprises and helped the National Guard helivac people out of an abandoned or out of a blown up city. It's a rough summation of kind of what happens here. And that would have made sense, right? So you get the light and the dark. You have something happening in the daytime and at night. And then that influences this element for the billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne to come out, be a hero, and start fighting the corruption on the front end of this thing, in the daylight side of this thing. From a feeling of Batman, even Wayne Manor, or what they treat as Wayne Manor, is very gothic and dour, and it's hard believing that anyone could actually live in such a spot. It's some really strange castle / gothic / medieval keep and hold that he lives in and survives in. That's really weird. I don't know if I jive with that exactly, because it's not exactly luxury. When we think about Batman, we think about Bruce Wayne, we think about luxury, and in this one, it's almost like a prison. Everything around Batman, including the Batcave, is just dour and miserable, and I don't see that being who the Bat is. Batman is dour. He's very dry, but he's dry with an air of hope about him. And that's what this movie is missing. And I'm hoping that if they do decide to do something else in the future with this, that they do lighten it just a tad from a perspective of hope. And that they get back to the ideal that Batman is supposed to not just be hope, and he's not just supposed to be this guy who fails consistently in everything. At no point does Batman prevent a death. At one point, Batman is actually complicit in a death. And yet, he never actually solves a mystery. He never solves a crime, as hard as he tries. And so, there needs to be some element of development there. Also, there needs to be an element of development with his morality. Batman needs to be able to change the hearts of those that are corrupted, like Selina, who because Selina Kyle's big thing here, her entire motif is that no one is beyond saving, right? Like that is her biggest motif throughout the entire Batman thing, is that she seems like someone who is only out for herself. She's supposed to be one of the bad guys, but because Batman sees something more in her due to her circumstance, he doesn't lump her into the same crowd as he does everyone else who is just a clinical psychopath. Sure, she's a kleptomaniac. However, there is a way out of that. There is salvation that can be had, in the same way that Jason Todd's Robin is supposed to be like, this is what happens whenever young boys are abandoned. There's a different dynamic to this side character that we just don't get to see. And there's this really weird ending moment where Bruce and Selina are riding their motorcycles down through a graveyard, and then they have that splitting of ways, and it's supposed to be super symbolic about the two different paths in their lives that they're taking. And it just doesn't work for me, because first of all, there was no real romance between them in the first place, and second of all, there was no attempt at Batman to convince her to come to the other side. It's just her constantly trying to corrupt him, and him almost going with it, and then sort of his duty kind of coming out about it. And it's like, why? That doesn't jive. It doesn't actually make any sense. Those are all of my thoughts. I'm actually saving a lot of my thoughts on the woke stuff, because if anybody who goes into this with a critically thinking mind, you'll pick up on all of the different woke things. All in all, it was an entertaining movie. If you like slow movies, if you like pretty movies, this is probably a movie that you'll enjoy. But from a plot perspective, greatly flawed. From an understanding of Batman perspective, greatly flawed. I loved Robert Pattinson's acting. That's one of the other great things about this, is even in this goes to prove the point that Robert Pattinson is a phenomenal actor, is that even given a very limited script, he was able to do something with it that made me fall in love with his Batman even still. There seems to be more to his character that I wish was revealed through writing that we just didn't get. So those are my thoughts, my broad thoughts on all of this stuff. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope that you guys leave a comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Please help us grow the channel. Share to everybody that you know. And I will see you guys in the next one. Beat it, nerds.